Let's take a couple of minutes to look at what is happening in the international freight space and what has led up to this point of basic, total, and colossal global supply chain meltdown. So first of all, some important details that you should know. International freight and international trade are really, really big. $19 trillion worth of goods are exported around the world every single year. Now, by size, about 90% of that goes by these gigantic ships that you've seen on the news, just like the Ever Given. About a third of world trade by value goes by air, so I think things like cell phones, electronics, chips, which you also probably heard of. Everything comes from somewhere. When global supply chains get stretched, it impacts every single one of us. Now, if you take a big look at what's happening, and I think the easiest way to see this is in international freight prices, you'll see that 40-foot containers shipped around the world used to be shockingly cheap. Just 5 years ago, a top 10 global ocean liner went bankrupt because prices were so cheap. It used to be cheaper to take a container of goods, throw it onto a ship, and ship it around the world for the entire year compared to keeping it in a warehouse in Manhattan. So if you go back to August 2019, it would cost about $1,300 to ship one of these containers around the world. August 2020, $3,200, starting to get a little crazy. August 2021, $18,425, and today that is over $20,000. That's a really big deal, and it impacts every single person. So there's a lot of reasons why the rates have been going up and why there's been supply chain challenges. There's been roving COVID port shutdowns, people buying stuff instead of buying services during lockdowns. This Ever Given Suez Canal fallout, passenger flight cancellations, and all of the right containers in all of the wrong places. Together, those turn global freight into a massive shipstorm, and I'll dive into each one of those soon. But let me get egocentric for a second and first talk about what it means to you. It's going to take longer to get stuff. A couch that I ordered about 6 months ago is still not here, and it's not here for a reason. It's not here because it is stuck in a port somewhere and not getting unloaded. That's surprisingly decent. The average freight door-to-door shipping from China to the United States has gone up from just 40 days to over 70 days in the past year, and that's just getting it to the warehouse. It still needs to get to your doorstep after that. And that's only if your importer is lucky enough to have space. Think Uber surge pricing is bad. Ocean liners are now charging surcharges of over $5,000 on top of their regular prices just to actually get space on a ship. Now, you don't need to be an economist to know that higher prices for shipping means higher prices on goods. Timber was up 55% from August 2019. Wheat was up about 20% too. At Freightos, an online freight marketplace, we ran this survey of small e-commerce sellers and found that 45% of them were planning on increasing prices. And when they increase prices, prices increase for you. And that was back when prices were less than 50% of what they are now to ship. Right now, it's even higher. Now, I talked a little bit before about air cargo, and air cargo is not that much better. 50% of all capacity is moved by passenger planes, and when those stopped flying, suddenly there's half as much space as there used to be, and freight prices went up by about 400%. Now, air cargo is a little bit easier to address, so some of those passenger planes were converted into cargo planes, and of course, now more and more passenger flights are starting to move around, right? So things are getting a little bit better, but as I said before, 90% of all goods still go by ocean. So why did this happen? Well, because you started ordering more things online, and so did I, right? We weren't going out, we weren't going on trips around the world, we weren't spending money on services, and US imports have just skyrocketed. Now, together, that means that there's more demand, there isn't as much capacity, prices are definitely going to go up. Now, you can order more of these gigantic ships in order to ship goods around, but it takes a really long time to build a 22,000 container ship, right? This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Now, empty containers were also kind of to blame for this. In the very beginning of COVID, it wasn't clear that there'd be that many people that are trying to ship goods. So all these empty containers were piled up in the wrong places, and suddenly when you need to export stuff from, say, Asia, there aren't empty containers to shove them into, so you just can't get them there. Now, on the United States side, that got a little bit complicated too, because these ships were trying to prioritize sending containers back. And that meant, well, we can't afford to spend the time letting them get loaded, so suddenly all these goods in the US that were supposed to get exported were not even making it onto a ship and was creating bottlenecks at both sides. Now, this reached the point a couple of months ago where Maersk, the world's largest ocean liner, put out a bulletin to all their customers saying, please bring those containers back to us. Now, there's another element at play here, which is people, right? There's still people at the loop. Somebody needs to operate the gantry cranes, that's what they're called, that take the containers off of the ships. There's people that need to work in the warehouses. And when there's a COVID outbreak somewhere, the airports can't work, right? So we've seen airports and seaports shut down globally. More recently, a couple of months ago, the entire port of Ningbo in China was shut down because of one case of COVID and a very, very strict Chinese policy trying to eradicate COVID totally. Now, this has happened a couple of times in the port of Yantian, which is a gigantic port in China. There was another shutdown. And we've also seen these weather challenges like typhoons that shut down ports in Vietnam and in Asia. Now, the Ever Given running aground in the Suez Canal was not great, but getting it back afloat doesn't really save the day because a week backlog because of the Suez Canal means that all these ships are going to reach the port in the United States or in Europe later. And then they're all going to wait to get unloaded. And then they're going to have to go back. And once they get back to Asia, they're going to wait to get unloaded there. So you have these cascading effects where one problem in one place can lead to months of problems somewhere else. So all these stop and go delays lead to congestion. When it gets really bad, you'll see a couple of ships waiting to unload at the port in Long Beach, which is the US's largest port. Over the past couple of days, we've seen more than 70 ships waiting to unload. It is the world's largest traffic jam. So yeah, it's not the store's fault that your patio furniture or fire pit might not make it in time for Christmas. Your Christmas lights might not make it in time for February. Now, some of the larger companies have been doing a good job digging themselves out, like Home Depot literally chartered their own ship in order to ship goods, and when Peloton wanted to get their treadmills or bikes out to you, they threw them onto airplanes, but not everybody can really afford that. So long story short, where are we today? We're done with Squid Games, and it's really, really hard to wait for another season. We're also in the middle of a massive supply chain meltdown. And it's only really going to get better once consumption starts to drop down a little bit and once infrastructure gets a little bit better. All of these are large, long-term things, and it means that the way that we buy and the way that companies import is going to need to modify. If you need any more information, I strongly recommend you head over to our company's website, Freightos.com. We are the world's largest international freight marketplace. You can see instant rates for how much it costs to ship across a bunch of different freight forwarders. We also run the world's largest daily freight container index at fbx.freightos.com, as well as a new air cargo index that's in beta at the same address. My name is Eytan Buchman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Freightos. This was me talking very fast for a long time about freight. I hope it was useful.